Hey guys, what's up? It's Cece here, and today I'm going to talk about the 10 things that I hate about Korea. Hate is a really strong word. It's more like the 10 things that I find challenging about living in Korea, or that I just am not the biggest fan of. I don't really hate any of these things. It's just the part of living in a different country and adapting to a different way of life. So these are the things that I find challenging or hard or gross. Okay, so let's get into it.
Yeah, get into it.
Number one of the first things that I noticed about living in Korea is the lack of color. I love bright colors. I love to look like a highlighter. I love to look like an Easter egg. Like, I just like bright colors, and that is something that is definitely lacking here in Korea. So many people, like majority of the people here, dress in black, white, gray, tan, and that's it. There is a little bit of color, especially now that we're coming into like spring and summer. I'm seeing more like a light, very light, like pastels, pinks and yellows and light blues and stuff like that, but definitely nothing bright like this, or just lack of bright colors. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. I just feel like Korea is such a like collective country that so many people like to wear the same thing, have the same hairstyle, and things like that. So there's not much like individuality with the clothing that people wear. So I think that is just something that I noticed right away, that I'm just like, oh, come on, like, I want some color, baby. Is that so much to ask for? Number two, cars don't care about crosswalks. And I'm not talking about crosswalks at a red light. I'm talking about a crosswalk where there's no light, but there's like a crosswalk for pedestrians to cross safely. Cars don't stop. They don't care. They just don't at all. And maybe that's something in the US. Like, I don't know. In the US, cars stop for pedestrians. Like, that's like the law. You stop when you see a person on the side of the road and they want to cross the street. Here, no, they don't care. They just keep going. Doesn't matter. And I think I looked up if it was a law, and I think they're supposed to stop, but they just don't care. So that is something that I find challenging, because I've missed the bus too many times because cars don't stop. But it's fine. It's fine. This kind of segues into public transportation. I said that I missed the bus a lot. I mean, I know my bus schedules now, so thankfully I don't miss them anymore. But if you aren't in a big city like Seoul or Busan or any other big city, the public transportation is quite challenging. Okay, challenging maybe isn't the right word. It's just the buses aren't as frequent. Obviously there's less people, so it makes sense why there's less, like, they come less often, because there's less people, so therefore there's less buses, etc., etc. So it makes sense. It's funny because when you come here, something that you hear is like, the public transportation is so great, woohoo! Like, that's a big plus about Korea. And I'm like, yeah, if you live in Seoul, it's great. There's the subway, there's a million buses, there's the ITX and the KTX and all that great stuff. And of course, I live in a city that does not have a KTX station. So there's that as well. And so if you're not like in a city that has it, it's much more difficult. But I have a love-hate relationship, because obviously they get me where I need to go. I don't have a car, so obviously I need to take them. So I'm very grateful that they do exist. There has just been some struggles. The struggle bus.
Seatbelts, everyone!
Oh my god. Number 4. Cafes and breakfast places don't open till like 10 or 11. I am an early riser, okay? I wake up at the break of dawn. I remember the first time I went to Seoul, I was up, I don't know, probably like 6 or 7 a.m. just because I'm excited. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go like find coffee, I'm gonna go eat breakfast and like journal before I like start my day. Not one place was open except for like Starbucks or Paris Baguette, just like any of the chains that were open early. But there's no like cute cafes. They all don't open till like 10 or 11 or even 12 sometimes. And I'm like, who wants to eat breakfast at 12? I'm like, by 12, I need 2 cups of coffee. I don't want to have my first cup of coffee at 12. Ugh. Like, I don't know. That doesn't really make sense to me. And it's so different from like the US or Europe, especially, where you can get a cup of coffee any freaking time of the day. Like, it could be 3 a.m. and you're rolling out of the club and you want to go get an espresso. You can go get one. That's just not a thing here. Like, the cafes are just open so much later. But, I mean, the cafe culture is great, but it's just, I wish they opened earlier because I need to eat before 11. I need coffee before 11. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 5, groceries can be really expensive. If you want fruit, you're forking up the big bucks. Like, any fruit is really expensive. Vegetables are okay, but even like meat and fish, super expensive. And things that you think about that are really cheap in the US, like cans of beans, they like don't even have cans of beans here. I'm like, all I want is like a can of chickpeas and it's like $4. And I'm like, what? This is literally 99 cents at home. So that is really strange. Fruit is really expensive, especially if it's out of season. So like, you definitely eat the fruit that is in season here. Strawberries are they were in season. They're kind of going out, but out of season, they were like 20,000 won, which is like $20 for a thing of strawberries. And then when they're in season, it's like more like 8 or 9, but you get a lot. So it seems like $8 or $9 seems like a lot, but you get a lot of strawberries, so that's great. Tangerines are kind of out of season right now and they're like 15 bucks. Apples are like 15 bucks. Like, it's like expensive. And also it just kind of depends on the grocery store, but that was definitely a big thing. And like blueberries just like don't exist. I mean, and raspberries just like don't exist. I've maybe seen them once or twice. Definitely not a thing that is normal here, and again, really expensive. So it's just, was hard to get adapted to. It just kind of had to like change what I ate a little bit. Number 6, this one is not something that I hate or not even necessarily that I find annoying or whatever. It's just something that I noticed that is different. That in Korea, people don't hold doors open. And I realized that that's like completely a culture. In the US, we hold doors open. If you have a stroller, if you have your hands full, you just hold the door open for people like all the time. And here, or not even like fully hold it open, but even just like hold it like until the next person comes in. Like, that's just not a thing here. You don't really see people holding the doors open ever. It's not something that it doesn't really bother me. It's just a cultural difference that I noticed that I thought was a little strange. Number 7, there are no trash cans anywhere. Not at the parks, not like randomly on the street. I'm from Minnesota and there's trash cans all over the place. Like, any park you go to, there's trash, there's recycling, blah, blah, blah. In Korea, there are no trash cans anywhere. And so I get that they are very serious about recycling and separating the recyclables and stuff, which is great. But do you know how many times I've seen people just have their plastic coffee cup and just leave it on the street somewhere? I don't get that. Like, what? I would rather put it in a trash can or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but there are people who, I've seen the people in the morning who come and clean the streets like pretty much every day, which is great. But I don't think that should be like promoting people to litter. I don't know. Maybe somebody can explain. Number 8, the spitting. The noises that happen when people spit is foul, and I hate it. That is the one thing on this list that I actually hate. And that's all. Enough said. Number 9. This is something that bothered me really in the beginning just because I wasn't used to it. Now I'm kind of used to it, but there not being toilet paper in public restrooms. So oftentimes the toilet paper is not in the stalls. There's toilet paper, but it's on the outside, and so you have to grab it before you go into the stall, which is just kind of obnoxious. And now I'm kind of used to it, so I care less, but sometimes there's also no toilet paper at all, so you have to be prepared, which, yeah, it's just something to get used to. And last but not least, number 10, the lack of vegetarian options. Coming here vegetarian was probably like not the best idea. I've met so many people who were like, yeah, I used to be vegetarian, but then I came to Korea and I'm not anymore. And I think it doesn't help that I live in a rural area. I think it's much easier to be vegetarian living in Seoul, where there's 1,000,005 options for restaurants. I'm definitely very lax on my vegetarianism because, you know what, Korean meat is really fucking good. It just is, and I have no shame around that. I don't care. I have tried it and I love it and I eat it here and there. And it's so funny too. Like, I told my students the other day that I was vegetarian and they were just like, oh, teacher, no! Teacher, why? And I'm just like, don't hate me. But yeah, it was so funny. They were just like so shocked that I don't eat meat. And just a few other people that I've told that I don't eat meat very often are just like, they don't understand why. Or they don't get that a human can not eat meat. Like, it's pretty funny actually. This one woman was like very concerned for me. She was like, you don't eat meat? Like, what do you eat? And she like pulled up all these recipes for me. It was so cute. And she was like, let's make bread. Like, I'll make you bread and we can eat bread. And I was like, okay, thank you. It was so cute. And that's not even necessarily a problem. It's just like personal preferences, you know, and it's definitely doable. I mean, I had another friend who went vegan as she was here, so it's definitely doable. And especially if you like to cook and you eat at home and stuff like that, it just gets more difficult when you go out to eat is the biggest problems. But even when you get meat, you get like all the banchan side dishes, which are usually all veggies. There's sometimes fish or meat or whatever, but most of the time it's like veggies and tofu and kimchi and stuff like that. So there's definitely ways to be vegetarian here. I just think like the lack of options is something that was difficult for me, especially being pretty vegetarian at home. Hey, I just wanted to pop on here really quick because I just started editing this video right after I filmed it, and I forgot one of the major things that I hate here, that I actually do hate here, is the mold. When I moved into my apartment, it was covered in mold, like everywhere. Like, it was so gross. I think Korea has a major mold problem, and I just think it's lack of insulation in the buildings. So, and it's really humid here, like even in the winter it's humid, so there's just like always moisture in the air, and mold just grows and it comes back no matter how often you clean it. She don't leave you alone, she comes back. So that's the last thing I have to say. That was just like a really big one. I was like, I can't believe I forgot to say that. So I just had to throw that in quick. So those are my 10 things that I hate, find challenging or difficult or had to overcome or whatever about living in Korea. And I've been here about 8 months. So those are like the hardest things, which really, they're not that hard. So living in Korea is wonderful, and I actually do really enjoy it. It's definitely had its ups and downs, which I will probably make another video about because whew, it has been a whirlwind. But next week, be sure to tune in because I'll be talking about the 10 things that I love about Korea. So be sure to catch that video next week and hit the like button and subscribe. And if you are watching this and you're like, how can you hate that? Or you have something like, you don't hate this, like, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear things all about Korea, about what you think. If you have anything about what I said, like, let me know. I'd love to chat with you. Mwah! All right, my lovely people, I will see you next week. Bye.